Good evening. Welcome to the Betty Intagliata lecture series. Betty's here herself. Funded by Dr. Bill Jervey with an endowment. Bill, thank you for your support. These lectures are free and open to the public, so welcome. We have a special guest tonight, Frank Cassell. Frankly speaking, it's great to have another Frank. And Frank has been around in Sarasota County since 2007. They would not let him retire. He is a professor and president emeritus from the University of Pittsburgh and got his PhD at Northwestern University. He's been a teacher and an administrator and has published lots of books. And if you go online, you can see them all. Most interesting, I think, if you've read The Great White Devil in the White City, was that it? Devil in the White City? That's not his book, but he wrote extensively about the Columbian Exposition of 1893. He didn't attend that, I'm told. So he's written extensively since coming down here about Bertha Honoré Palmer, and we're going to have him tell us about the creation of Sarasota County. Many newcomers here may not remember that we used to be part of Manatee County, pardon me for saying so, and there was a big political struggle, and he'll tell you about that. And that's why we've got the Tamiami Trail on this side of the peninsula instead of the other side. Frank has been active in the History Coalition of Sarasota County, and we are members of that, and we appreciate all the work that he's done. Now, he stepped back from that and said, I'm done. I have to tell you that he is irreplaceable because no one has replaced him yet. So if anybody would like to step forward, please come on up. Without further ado, Frank Cassell.
Well, first, let's see if I'm speaking properly into this. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay. If I begin to wane, wave your hands, shout obscenities, something to alert me to my shortcoming. Thank you for having me here again. I have been a lecturer in this series before, and it's always a wonderful occasion. Tonight is particularly a nice occasion for me, but also, and let me introduce her, my wife, Beth. Beth, you want to wave your arm over there? That's Elizabeth Cassell, and who has just left the post of president of the Friends of the Fruitvale Library after 12 years in that job. And she always supports me in these kinds of lectures. First of all, by typing the damn thing so that I've got something to read, and also by the fact that she puts together these wonderful slides, which you're going to see, which sort of add a bit of life to the lecture. The topic is creating Sarasota County. It's one I've actually talked to the Venice Area Historical Society about before. Unfortunately, it was during the COVID, the year of COVID, so it was all done long distance and behind masks. That was about 5 years ago, I think, Betty. Betty made the arrangements for that. And What I'm going to do tonight is rehearse that story, although I've added some stuff which I think might interest you about it. First of all, let me say that Sarasota, or the county, the idea of county histories is in some ways appalling. I don't know if you've ever read a county history. We have, 3,000 some odd counties in America, and they all have at least one history. Many have multiple histories, and they're just awful. In my experience, by the way, every one of them will tell you some version of the story of how they got to be a county. But I couldn't find any county in America, I can't say I looked at every one of them, that has a whole book written exclusively about the act of creating a county. And I want you to know you're very fortunate to live in that county, and that you can sneer at people from other counties who have inferior histories. And I'm proud to have been part of that process. Well, tonight I think what we'll do is to break it down this way. Basically, three kinds of questions or issues I want to talk to you about. One is why Sarasota County, or the people of what was called the Sarasota District, wanted to free themselves from their attachment to Manatee County. Secondly, how did they do it? And thirdly, what were the short and long-term results of that climactic political contest in 1921? So to begin, why did the Sarasota District fight to become a county? Well, in 1910, which is a year pregnant with significance for this area, the Sarasota District was the southern 1/3 of Manatee County. Manatee itself had been in existence, I think, since 1855 or so, but it's like all counties, it was calved off of, larger counties, and Sarasota was part of what was included in this new Manatee County. It was the lower third. It was not all that well populated. There were actually in 1910 fairly few people living in what we think of as Sarasota County today. The biggest settlement by far was the town of Sarasota, and even that had less than 900 people in it, and no paved roads, among other things. The best that can be said for it at that point is that it was a destination for rich people who like to fish. As I said, there were no paved roads. There really weren't many roads to speak of at all. The communications between Sarasota and the rest of the world were almost entirely by water along the bays and the Gulf of Mexico. I'm sorry, the Gulf, what is it now called? The Gulf of something else? America. Gulf of America, okay. We have to learn these things. This situation, the meaning of this situation is fundamentally Sarasota was a place going nowhere in 1910, partly because there was a national recession or depression going on, and it just wasn't a good time. But as Betty would readily tell you, there was one huge, huge event in 1910 that changed everything. And that was the arrival of Bertha Honore Palmer by train. Her personal rail car, dropped her off in Sarasota. She was met by some of the leading lights of the community, and she was down there to look for a winter home. And she kind of liked the people. They certainly realized that she'd be a hell of a catch if they could persuade her to stay around. Who was Bertha Honore Palmer? Well, probably most of you have heard about her, but for those newcomers that may not be as familiar with her as we locals are. In 1910, she was arguably the most famous American woman in the world. She had achieved tremendous fame just by being the social leader of Chicago, the queen bee of society, the Mrs. Astor of Chicago. In fact, Mrs. Astor would have been her only peer in the business of being a social leader in America. It was Bertha who decided who was to be considered part of the elite rich crowd of Chicago and who were the pretenders that needed to be dismissed. Bertha liked the place so much that she bought it, or she bought a huge hunk of the place. She not only bought an estate, or a place to have her estate, but then 140,000 acres later, which is about half of what Sarasota County is today, she became the largest landowner. And the trouble was, of course, that most of it was worthless. Most of it was bog land, jungle. Unless you lived on a ridge, B ridge or whatever, you weren't high enough to have dry land in which you could organize an agricultural enterprise. But Mrs. Palmer, for reasons perhaps unique to her, didn't buy that. And indeed, the idea of people changing nature to make money from it was very familiar to her. Certainly in Chicago, the land speculation, buying land, slight improvements, sell it for many times more. That was a very familiar theme. And she also knew, from the way Chicago was built on rather sandy foundations, that there were ways to change the absolute ground, so that instead of bogland, you had solid, arable land. She buys all this land, but she doesn't buy it in the sense of, wanting to look at it. She wants to make money from it. And to do that, she remakes the whole area. Within a breathtakingly short period of time, just a few years, she builds towns. She secures a railroad extending from Sarasota down to Venice here, which was a godsend to the people, or the future people of Venice at the time. She constructed miles of local roads on her property and irrigation canals, which were vital to draining the swamps, but at the same time to allow for bringing in water in the dry season to allow crops to grow. As a result of all this, thousands of people responding to her nationwide publicity campaign bought land from her. And they came down here and they settled. Her first great experiment was Bee Ridge, which was amazing what she was able to do there. And it turned into an extraordinarily profitable business for her. These people, and I won't go into the details of all the other land development schemes that she was involved in, but the result of all of this is all these people show up, and they need to be taken care of. I mean, there has to be an infrastructure in place, not just canals and irrigation and some local roads. They need other kinds of people. And so before very long, you had a growing class of lawyers, doctors, bankers, car dealers, and other small businessmen who bet on the continued growth and prosperity of the Sarasota area. And with growth, of course, become children, and a skyrocketing demand for schools, as well as for law enforcement, utilities, improved transportation, particularly improved transportation, particularly good roads, which was a phrase that was used nationally, not just in Sarasota. There was a national good roads movement because of the coming of the automobile. Now, in all of this that was going on in Sarasota, this burgeoning population, this exploding wealth that was beginning to reshape the social structure of the area, all of this required support. And it needed financial support from Manatee County. Well, therein lay a problem. Manatee County today, then, had 5 commissioners, and 4 of them came from Bradenton, or Bradentown as it was called then, and the northern part of Manatee County. The majority of these commissioners had little interest in helping the Sarasota district develop. They saw it increasingly not as an area of neighbors, but as an economic competitor to Bradentown and Anna Maria Island, both as development centers and tourist attractions. It was not in their interest to build roads leading to Sarasota. That's kind of the bottom line of it. Nor was it in their interest to build a proper school system in Sarasota. As the Sarasotans proved when they went to the legislature, they received less back in support for education than they paid in taxes for education. And in other words, the Manatee County people were skimming the tax pot for their own benefit and at a cost to the people of the Sarasota district. Now, let's get back a bit to the roads. The good roads issue, at least in Sarasota, had been simmering for some time, certainly since Mrs. Palmer's arrival. Good roads were essential, for example, to move citrus and vegetable crops from the field to railroad stations. Now, Mrs. Palmer had seen to the fact that there was a decent railroad with five stations along it between Venice and Sarasota. But how did you actually get from the stuff? Remember, this is stuff that rots, so that there's a real time constraint at work here. I mean, the railroad cars may have some cooling, But there's really a clock ticking away as to how long this stuff is going to be worth anything when it gets to New York or Ontario or wherever it was directed. That required roads, real roads, paved roads, not dirt roads, not muddy roads, real roads. And they had to run the right places to carry out what needed to be done. Now this, in a sense, was happening all over America. Counties traditionally had been the road builders. It wasn't the states, and it wasn't certainly the federal government that built roads. It was always the counties. They were responsible for roads. But that was kind of the 19th century. What happens when you get the Model T Ford? What happens when suddenly millions of Americans have cars? And after World War II, after World War I, let's add something else in. The end of the war left the United States with a huge stockpile of big trucks that have been used for military purposes. Those trucks are sold off as surplus and become the basis of the American trucking industry. And those damn trucks have got to have roads too. And it also, that brought a powerful business lobby into the whole discussion that was taking place nationally about how do we deal with this huge national demand for good roads. Everybody seemed to want to get into the act. I mentioned Carl Fisher. Some of you may know of Carl Fisher, famous for some of his Miami activities, but he earned his real reputation by being the builder of the Indianapolis 500 Speedway. And then later he gets into roads. He's a guy that kind of sees big. He sees intercontinental. He sees America as being a very different kind of place than it currently was. Fisher, among other things, gets involved with the Lincoln Highway Project. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Lincoln Highway Project. The Lincoln Highway exists. It is Route 30, US Route 30, which runs from New York City to San Francisco. It took a long time to build, and many parts of it, even after it was dedicated, many parts of it were not completely paved over. Now, the other thing that he got into was near and dear to his heart, and that was the Dixie Highway Project. Now, the Dixie Road Project actually was a system of roads that ran roughly from upper Michigan down to Miami, and which of course is a place that he had a lot of investments in, so he was very happy to try to build a road that, or, get other people to pay for building a road that would bring a lot of people to his holdings down in Miami. Now the thing that you need to know about the Dixie Highway is that, oh, thank you, you're a lifesaver. As we were saying, the Dixie Highway the reason the Dixie Highway becomes important in all of this is that in its original plan was something called the Tamiami Trail. And even in its earliest formulation, the Tamiami Trail from Tampa to Miami looked very close. Here's an old map that you can see the Tamiami Trail going all the way down the west coast of Florida. going down the west coast of Florida and crossing over the Everglades to Miami. It was an incredible feat, particularly the Everglades portion of this, and it took a lot of years and a lot of money, particularly through the Everglades, to build a modern road there. Now, the thing about the Tamiami Trail, which is an interesting story in and of itself, is that the Manatee people didn't like the route as it was on the map. What they were hoping to do was to keep Sarasota off the Tamiami Trail. And their idea was to stop the Tamiami Trail from Miami to Bradenton, but it stopped there. It didn't go any further south. Instead, it went east, and it went across the state, and and then linked up with the road system that already existed on the east coast. This was not entirely built until later, and it became, and today we drive it all the time, some of us do anyway, and it's State Road 70. And it was one of the first of what were then very few cross-state roads. So if they'd been able to pull this off, if they'd been able to stop the Tamiami Trail and make that left turn so that Sarasota wasn't going to be part of it, and on Route 70, which ran through Manatee County, would be nowhere near Sarasota. You know where it is today. Those of you that have driven it, you have to drive a fair piece to get to it. So this was the situation. Roads are life, roads are business, roads are progress, roads are money. The two key roads in this area were the Cross-State Road 70 and the Tamiami Trail. If you weren't on these roads, if your town, city, community wasn't on one of these roads, you just weren't going to go anywhere as a community. This is what makes this so important, and why it leads to the results that it does. Which brings us then to the question, how did Sarasota County come into existence? Well, the Sarasotans had objected like mad, as you might imagine. As early as 1915, Bertha Palmer had sent one of her lawyers to Tampa to explore the possibilities of getting a bill passed through the legislature creating Sarasota County. Now, there's no record of what happened there, but it clearly never came to fruition. And she dies in 1918. Nonetheless, she was the moving force in many ways behind the ultimate success of the effort to make this a county. The sequence is this, that on June 16th of 1920, that a call went out in Sarasota, the city of Sarasota, for a mass meeting. A very democratic idea. Anybody can show up and speak, and they hope it would make decisions. There were people behind this, though. The Chamber of Commerce in Sarasota, powerful, powerful force. The Sarasota City Commission was solidly behind this. And in fact, most of the people that were fighting for the roads were the same as the people on the board of the on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, and they were the city commissioners. So it was all incestuous. But the result is they were a pretty coordinated group of people. They chose to speak for them at that first mass meeting, Dr. Joseph Holton. Holton and his brother, English-born actually, had become doctors in America, and they both ended up in Sarasota, and they were running a clinic here at the time. And in fact, Joseph Holton's house still stands on Main Street or on Fruitville Road in Sarasota. He gave a powerful speech. And interestingly, he's an Englishman, and he's talking about the American Revolution as a paradigm for the situation that Sarasota is in. He even uses the phrase, no taxation without representation. And at the end, he closes with a long list of the ignominious ways that Manatee has treated the Sarasota district, and ends with the idea, or with the words, what he was particularly upset about was the negligence of our section by other parts of the county to our most crying need, good roads. This mass meeting of June 1920 was followed by other such meetings. Committees were appointed with members from every major settlement in the district. Those behind the drive for independence included all the major taxpayers in the Sarasota district. Bertha was dead, but her two sons, Honore and Potter, and her brother, Adrian Honore, were still in charge of the Palmer business empire. They were running things. And one of the things they did was first open up their offices in the city of Sarasota to any of these committees that needed a place to meet as they plotted a way to become a county. They also assigned some of their executives to work with these committees, providing another level of expertise. Now, you should add that there were some others besides the Palmers. There was Joseph Lord, who a familiar figure from Venice history. He was the guy that actually sold Bertha Palmer most of that land that she bought. He was a partner of somebody we'll talk about in a second, Arthur Britton Edwards. But Lord was still a major landowner and a major payer of taxes and a major mover within the movement to become a county. And as I mentioned, there was Arthur Britton Edwards, about whom it is almost impossible to say too much. First mayor of the city of Sarasota, and another Palmer ally, just like Edward, or Lord. Edwards kind of organized the local political effort. He had people spread out all over the district, meeting and talking with groups of settlers wherever they lived, and getting the story out there and talking about what could be done to create all the evils that they'd been subjected to. One of the loudest and most influential voices of the independence movement, belonged to Rose Phillips Wilson, owner, publisher, reporter for the weekly Sarasota Times, the chief and usually only newspaper published in the district. Nearly every issue reported on the separation movement and hammered on the tax and road grievances of the Sarasota citizens. More than anyone, she shaped public opinion on the county independence issue. In the spring of 1921, the Florida legislature prepared to meet, and the leaders of the separation movement made their move. A bill creating Sarasota County was drafted by Sarasota attorney John Burkett, and a lobbyist was dispatched to deliver it to Tallahassee. This was Augusta Wilson of Myakka, a former state senator and an active member of the chief committee seeking county status. Now, news of this bill finally reached Bradentown, and their reaction was immediate, which was they were very, very unhappy. And the Bradentown Board, Chamber of Commerce, took the lead in organizing an opposition as fast as possible. Soon, carloads of Bradentown businessmen went north to Tallahassee to get to the legislature and to testify against this bill. The Sarasota Chamber of Commerce had its own carloads of people driving north. We presume they didn't meet on the way up there. It would have probably been a bloody mess. But they carried with them petitions and statistics. One of the things about the way the Sarasota people put things together was almost scientifically, certainly with great rational thought. They did a lot of research, and they had run petition campaigns. I think they'd gotten well over 60–70% of the voters of Sarasota district on petitions. In other words, in a sense, they'd almost won this before it started. And if the bill passed, it would almost assure victory. Now, all of them showed up in Tallahassee, and there was a committee in the legislature that specialized in county applications, and that's where the battle commenced. And in this battle, the Sarasotans were not in good shape. The problem was that the Chamber of Commerce in Bradentown, because of its political leverage, controlled both the state representative and the state senator from the area. And with those two in opposition, it was virtually impossible to get that bill out of committee. And the result was it left the committee without any recommendation, which was a kiss of death sort of thing to do. And it was clear at that point that unless something happened soon to give that bill new life, Sarasota's bid for independence would be dead at least for 2 years, the next go-around of the legislature. So the Sarasotans did something. I don't know if they thought about it ahead of time or not, but one thing they knew was they were not going to wait 2 years to make this happen. So they decided on negotiations. They decided to go talk with their enemies up there in Manatee and see what could be worked out. And so a special delegation was appointed, led, of course, by A.B. Edwards. They went to Bradentown, and there Edwards addressed a large public meeting in Bradentown in which he made the case for separation and the determination of the people of Sarasota District to achieve independence no matter how long it would take. After that meeting, real business got done. That is to say that the delegates from Sarasota were ushered to a nearby hotel, and the delegation appointed by the Bradentown Chamber of Commerce joined them. The doors were shut, and negotiations commenced. Interestingly, the manatee position did not turn out to be as hard as it first appeared. Nobody knows what was said in that meeting, but in the end, a deal was cut. And it was an interesting deal, which has puzzled scholars ever since. There are some things we just can't get answers to. The deal was this. Manatee would withdraw its opposition to the bill to create Sarasota County if the Sarasotans agreed to change the proposed dimensions of their county. They wanted land. And what they wanted specifically were 4 townships, which equals 144 square miles, in the northeast corner of what would have been Sarasota County. Now, why was this there? I mean, the area at the time was not very prosperous. It was right near the big river, and there was a lot of flooding. But there was one highly successful economic enterprise, which was grapefruit growing. And it could be that part of what was going on was that they didn't want to see that very prosperous business drift into Sarasota County and away from Manatee County. The other thing to keep in mind is that it was exactly through that area that Route 70 ran. And I guess it's as much my guess as anything that they still hope to keep Sarasota from being able to connect up with Route 70. And if they could hold that land, then they could use their political power simply to deny to Sarasota the ability to build a road connecting them up, which is what they ultimately do. Well, the Sarasotans didn't think very long about this before they decided that was a pretty damn good deal. And they went home and they told their constituents, look, we've accepted this. We're all going, both people from the Manatee Chamber of Commerce and from the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce were all going to Tallahassee. They would make a joint presentation to the legislature and say all was love and kisses, forget what went on in the past, vote for the bill. And they told their constituents, it was tough to lose roughly 20% of what we thought was going to be our county. But on the other hand, it's not worth very much, and it wasn't worth bothering about. And with that, that happened. The legislature passed it unanimously in both houses, and the governor, Kerry Hardee, on May 15th of 1921, signed the bill, and with that, let the celebration begin, or should it? Well, anyway, there was a celebration. And that was in Sarasota, in the city of Sarasota, in the 5 Points area, which was kind of the center of town. And I don't know, I suppose by modern standards it wasn't much of a party, but a lot of cars driving around and honking. And the city fire truck driving around and somebody ringing the bell. And, and then they went home, went to bed. But it was a significant win. But buried in the bill was a proviso, and in that bill, which could not go into effect until this proviso was taken care of, you had to have a vote in the Sarasota district among the very people who claimed they wanted to be an independent county. Now, this would be put before them. It would be an election run by the state, and people would have to declare, are you for it or against it? Well, they were pretty confident, but they didn't leave anything to chance. And the first thing they did was they went to see Rose Wilson, the one who had kind of carried the burden of running the public relations for this campaign. And they went to her and said, we need your help again. She pointed out that the day after Governor Carey signed that bill, she had changed the name of her newspaper from the Sarasota Times to the Sarasota County Times. And then began kind of a long, well, it wasn't all that long, but a seemingly lengthy campaign, fought out to some extent in the press. There was opposition. People did write in and say they thought all of this was just going to be too expensive, and we'd have to build a new courthouse, and we'd have to have a new jail, and all sorts of things, and is it really worth it? And some people claim that the Palmers just wanted this to happen because they owned all this inland property and they wanted help building roads and bridges and things, when in fact what really needed to happen were building roads and bridges among the key islands, the keys, to connect them up. So it didn't make any difference in the end. Probably the one thing that probably did make a difference, though, was Rose Wilson and the Sarasota Women's Club. To put this in perspective, the 19th Amendment, the one that gave women the vote, had passed shortly before this. I believe women were able to vote for the first time in the 1920 presidential election. And this election would have been the first local election in which they would be able to vote. So in part, this was a public education campaign that Rose and the Women's Club ran to sort of talk about the act of voting. And not just the pros and cons of the measure, but how do you vote? How do you do that? Where do you do it? Then the question of a poll tax came up. It turns out everybody had to pay a poll tax. Even if you hadn't been able to vote before this, you still had to pay a poll tax. Now, the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce took care of that very fast. They announced to a meeting of the Women's Club that don't worry about it, we'll pay the poll tax for you. Now, I don't know if that was legal or not, or somebody might have said that they were buying votes, but they got a lot of women out to vote for countyhood, and it carried by 80%. I mean, it was an overwhelming victory. Now, the governor accepted the vote, and he appointed the first officers of the county with Frank Walpole, who became the first chair of the Board of County Commissioners. They set July 1st as the first day of existence of the new county. And when all the officers assumed their positions, the sheriff, the Board of County Commissioners, the county clerk, judge, all had to come in at that point. Now, with that, I should add that in the short term there were problems, like a hurricane, which which this new government, not very well organized, some real problems. They managed to get offices in the Hover Arcade building in Sarasota, right next to the city government of Sarasota. And in early 1927, to jump ahead a bit, Sarasota County opened the doors of its $1 million courthouse, which of course still stands today. And with that, the formative period of Sarasota County came to an end. So briefly, because I've run over here, briefly, what did all this mean? What was the significance of it? Well, certainly now free from interference from Manatee County, Sarasota County was able to beat back their efforts to reroute the Tamiami Trail and keep Sarasota from connecting to the Cross-State Highway. They simply built another connecting road, and it's still there today. The result was that both these key roads, which were at the time so important to the economic future of the area, were secured. And that was vitally, vitally important. Now the struggle for roads and county independence did something else. It actually helped create a true county. That is to say, this was a real struggle. This wasn't given to them. This was something that required teamwork, and you had to overcome obstacles. And for the first time, really, you had people all across Sarasota, what was now going to be Sarasota County, working together. All those committees that had representatives from every community had helped to build a sense of citizenship for the county, for the idea of the county. That was highly significant. So what can we say about the long run? Well, you probably know in the history of counties that the 20th century was a really great period for county history, for county government. County governments suddenly became major dispensers of government services as state and federal monies flowed down to them. And so all these counties did pretty well off these general developments. Fire, police, healthcare, a range of social services are all concerns of county government, more so by far than in 1921. All this thanks to independence, Sarasota residents have greater control and access to these resources than would have been the case had they stayed with Manatee County. Do you want to deal with your tax problems in Bradenton? Let me cite a few statistics to try to answer the even larger question. How well was the promise of becoming a county fulfilled? Did Sarasota become the elegant creation that its founders anticipated? Well, I didn't do a lot of original research here, but let me point out a few things. For a long time, Manatee had the larger population of the two counties, even after separation, which isn't surprising. But for a long time, Sarasota has been the bigger of the two counties. The last figures I could come up with are 439,000 in Sarasota County and 405,000 in Manatee. Wealth is an interesting indicator of how well a county is doing. It's made up of several things like per capita income, things of that sort. Sarasota is the 6th wealthiest county in Florida. You think of all those high-priced areas along the East Coast, we're the sixth wealthiest, I can't even say it, wealthiest county in Florida. Manatee ranks 14th. Sarasota is ranked as the third healthiest Florida county, and is listed among the 500 healthiest counties in the United States. Manatee's health rating did not make the top 10 list in Florida. Now, I didn't find any statistics for this, but Sarasota is widely considered to be one of the great cultural centers in Florida. Some have even referred to it as the culture capital of Florida. What can I say? Manatee is not, though it certainly has some significant cultural assets. In education, the state rated Sarasota schools this year at the A level for the 20th straight year. The Sarasota system maintained its 5th place ranking of all Florida school districts. Manatee schools received a B rating. Now, my point here is not that Manatee County is a bad place, far from it, but that achieving independence allowed Sarasota County to flourish in ways that would otherwise have been unlikely. This was a pivotal moment in time in 1921. Once free of Manatee's biased administration, Sarasota County rapidly exploited its new opportunities to grow in population, wealth, business development, educational excellence, and cultural leadership. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why the creation of Sarasota County was so important, and why so many of us chose to come down here and live here. And we do indeed owe a debt of gratitude to the men and women who led this wonderful fight for independence. Thank you very much. And my apologies for the voice problem here.
Yeah, you talk about grading town, but I think we call it Bradenton now. Right. When did the switch happen, or why, or what?
Well, I don't remember exactly. It was a public relations thing. They had a public relations firm, I think in the 1950s, kind of come in and take a look at their problems, and he told them to lose the town. Lose the town and become Bradenton. So it was purely an image. But Bradentown, in fact, originally it was spelled Bradenton, which was a misspelling. And they finally changed that. But that's a good question, but I think that's what was happening. But it kind of shows how by the 50s, they were pretty clearly worried about Sarasota's taking off, and they were quite worried about it. Let me
How did Sarasota get its name?
How did Sarasota get its name? Well, all the books on Sarasota history try to address that issue, and it's by and large speculative. What they have is an old Spanish map, something like Sarasota, it says, and there's some other things that suggest something around Sarasota, but they don't really have, some precise piece of evidence that so-and-so on this date declared this shall be called Sarasota. But a good question. But you'll find when you read books on Sarasota history that every scholar kind of shakes their head trying to, it's just not there. The evidence just isn't there. I'm sorry, sir, are you back here?
Do you know how was Bertha Palmer's estate when she passed away? What happened to it?
Well, it went to most of it went to the two boys. Some of it, such as the Meadow Sweet Pastures Ranch in Mayaca, went to her brother. She had large holdings around Tampa that also went to her brother. The boys basically did a pretty good job managing their properties. The Palmer Farms, or the Palmer housing development not far from here, was something that was built on land that Honore Palmer had made into a cattle ranch, copied his mother, even used the same name title for it. But in the end, most of it was sold off to developers. I don't think there's really anything left that I'm aware of. There may be, but I'm not aware of it. There was a lot of parcels of land all over the place. It wasn't all just in Sarasota County, and it wasn't all just in southern or southwestern Sarasota County. But I can't answer that
Thank you.
as well as I'd like. Yes, ma'am, and then sir will come to you.
The legend of Sarah DeSoto has been very, very prevalent. She was considered to be Hernando DeSoto's daughter, although she never had a daughter, anyone knows. But the story was that she fell in love with an Indian brave and tried to nurse him back to health when he got sick. And then she caught whatever he had, and she died. And he insisted that all of his warriors go out on a canoe in Sarasota Bay. And when they buried her in a canoe, dropped her in the water, the men all surrounded her and went down too. And that was the story that supposedly protected us for so long from the hurricanes. And the other one was that the high school in Sarasota used to name their princess every year Sarah DeSoto, and they chose the king and queen were the Sarah DeSoto and her boyfriend.
It never happened.
It's never been true, but
I hate to tell you.
Wonderful story.
If Manatee had its public relations boosters, so did Sarasota, and this was one. And I've got one at home, which is the whole thing written out. And I think it was done in 1915 by a resident of Sarasota. And it was really done with an eye towards tourism. And indeed, the annual Sarah DeSoto Festival became a real draw for people around that were coming down from the north in the days before Disney World, or even the Ringling Circus winter quarters in Sarasota. So it's the most I can say on that, but it's a shame. It's a charming, arrogant, racist, but it's a harmless story. I'm sorry, sir, I promised you.
You mentioned that Bertha Palmer built a few neighborhoods or towns such as Bee Ridge. Is there anything left of any of those original settlements?
Not much. Bee Ridge has some churches that are there. If you go to the corner of Proctor and Beneva maybe? McIntosh. The Historical Commission, which I was a part, put up historical markers there, which you can go see today. I mean, they're visible. And but she built extensively there, and she got the railroad to build an enormous rail station I mean, she brought, as I already told you, that she managed to arrange with the railroad to build the extension. She had a lot of pop with the railroads because of all the shipping she was doing. So she got the executives down here and said, look, this town's gonna go someplace. I want you to build a station that's appropriate. So they built a station for a town of 5,000 people. Now, Bee Ridge did flourish. It became the second largest settlement in Sarasota County for a while, in the heyday of the Bee Ridge settlement. But she had several industries, canning. She had a hotel there. And one of the things remaining there is the women's club. Bertha was a great supporter of women's clubs wherever she was, starting in her time in Chicago. And she, of course, was a major figure in the Sarasota Women's Club, but she helped women's clubs all over the county. And one of them, their clubhouse is still the original clubhouse.
In Bee Ridge.
In Bee Ridge, yeah. Yeah, so it's worth seeing if you haven't seen it. But most of the others, they had a town in the celery fields area. The two brothers built, for reasons which I won't go into, it didn't last very long. And there were several others that they put into. So, no, they appear to have played their role for some brief period of time and passed on. And somebody here, is somebody else over here? Yes, sir.
Quick commercial, Frank. I had the honor, and Betty as well, to serve with Dr. Cassell on the Centennial for Sarasota County, but it's still being paid for. There's an app, Inglewood, Bee Ridge, Fruitville to Mayaca, Philippi, Bama to Laurel, Courthouse area, Bayfront, downtown. 5 Points, Venice. And this was created because of COVID. You weren't out. So all these auto tours, and they're 50 minutes, an hour long, 50 stops in each one to discover our county. And it's excellent, and you can still get it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we're very proud of that, of those car tours, and they are easy to take. And they were subsequently updated to take into account changes in how things look, parking, roads, things of that sort. But it's certainly a cheap way to get around to see all these different parts of our lovely county.
And thank you for that.
Thank you, Frank.
So, I want to announce that next lecture, we will have Bertha Palmer here. She's well preserved. She masquerades as Sue Chapman, but she gives a very popular demonstration of Bertha Palmer, and we would love to have you back next time. That's on the 15th of April. So thanks for coming. We've got an auction. A raffle, I'm sorry. It's a raffle. So